Hello, my lovely listeners. I'm Dr. Mary Barson.
And I'm Dr. Lucy Burns. Welcome to this episode of Real Health and Weight Loss.
Hello, Dr. Lucy, my friend. How are you?
I am wonderful, Dr. Mary. We have had such a fantastic week, and I can't wait to tell our listeners about it.
Yes, we were presenters at a fabulous lifestyle medicine conference at Deakin University for their second year medical students. And it was wonderful. It was a lot of fun, and it was really so heartening and encouraging to see that low carbohydrate real food diets and the importance of real food is now becoming more and more mainstream, that it's even making its way into the medical student curriculum. And I would love to thank the two wonderful organisers. We got invited by the wonderful Claire McKee, who's a geriatrician in Geelong, and Karen Dwyer, who is a nephrologist, a renal physician in Geelong. And they did a fantastic job of putting together this wonderful education event.
And I think the thing about it that was great is that for a lot of these students, they had actually never heard of low carb, and, you know, traditional medical school training is still fairly focused on reducing saturated fats. So even for them to have the opportunity to question the current dogma, I thought was really great. And I mean, there were other speakers other than just us, which of course is also wonderful, including Australian of the Year, Dr. James Mweki, who we are going to have on the podcast later in the year, so I'm excited about that. But I think just the encouragement that is seeing a change happening across hopefully the world, but definitely Australia, that low carb is no longer considered fringe.
Absolutely. And I remember back just shortly after we met in May in 2019, you were presenting at the Australian College of Nutritional and Environmental Medicine at their conference in Melbourne. And I remember watching your talk and I loved it. And I remember back then in that conference, about half the talks were that old guard sort of calories in, calories out, reduced saturated fat is the path to health and wellness. And about half the talks were about metabolic health, reducing carbohydrate intake to heal metabolic health. And it was fascinating to be there and see the thinking start to change. And of course, Lucy, your talk was one of the fantastic enlightened talks where you talked about the hormonal cause of obesity. And you said something that really stuck in my mind. It was fabulous, and I still remember it to this day. You said that the treatment of obesity is not the same as the prevention, and that obese people cannot be treated as big, thin people. Can you explain what you meant by that profound statement?
Of course. Thanks, Mess, for such a lovely compliment. So when we were going through medical school, there was a really great saying for pediatrics that children are not little adults. And the reason that that is said is because the physiology for a child is different to the physiology for an adult. And the same can be said for women. Women are not small men. Again, our hormone profile, our physiology, whilst there are similarities, there are profound differences as well. So this is the same for somebody who has obesity. Their physiology is completely different to somebody who is lean. And so we can't treat them the same. You cannot treat obesity by prescribing a diet or a way of eating that is going to be suitable for a lean person, because it all comes back to our favourite hormone, insulin. That's the key. And interestingly, this was what I was so excited. I was mostly excited by about the Deakin talk, was that this concept was reinforced multiple times to the medical students that the treatment of obesity is different to the prevention. And unfortunately, when people say to somebody who has obesity, all you need to do is eat less and move more, it's just rubbish. It's not going to work for them.
Yes, it is such an important message to get through that the way to lose weight is not to prescribe to the calories in, calories out model. The way to lose weight sustainably and to heal your metabolism is to lower insulin, our master fat storage hormone. Lucy, could you give our listeners just a very, very quick recap on insulin and how we lower it?
Absolutely. There are 3 ways that we can lower insulin reasonably easily. So the first way is to reduce carbohydrates. And the reason for that is that when somebody has insulin resistance or their body is producing too much insulin, it occurs because insulin is released by our pancreas in response to the ingestion or the eating of carbohydrates. And a reminder, carbohydrates are sugars and starch. So all sugars and all starches are carbohydrates. And when we eat them, our pancreas produces insulin. And for the majority of people with obesity or overweight, they are producing more insulin than needed. Then the second one is fasting, intermittent fasting. We suggest to our patients that they don't do fasting until they have reduced their carbohydrates. It's very, very difficult if you are trying to fast and your insulin is high because you do literally run out of fuel. But those 2 techniques combined is an incredibly effective means of reducing your insulin, losing weight with minimal side effects. And then our third one is metformin, which is a medication. Metformin is an interesting medication. It's been around for bazillions of years and we still don't actually know how it works technically. But what it does do is sensitize the muscles to insulin. So the insulin can work more effectively and therefore the pancreas doesn't have to produce as much. There are other methods which include gastric, surgery and those sorts of things. But again, they're probably outside our scope in this podcast because, Mary, as you know, we are lifestyle medicine practitioners and our biggest passion is really to empower people simply by changing their lifestyle, not necessarily by having surgery.
Yes, especially when there are such wonderful and effective and really very doable lifestyle strategies that work. There was a topic that was brought up at this Deakin Lifestyle Medicine Conference a couple of times, which was the concept of blue zones and blue zone diets. And this ties in really well with what you were saying about the treatment of obesity is not the same as the prevention. So for people who aren't familiar, the blue zones are, there's about 7 of them, and they are places on the earth where these largely traditional communities of people have a very high proportion of people who live to be greater than 100. So these communities, little pockets of traditional communities where they have very high degree of health and longevity. And there are people who have gone into these communities and studied them, studied what they do, studied how they live, and studied what they eat. And there are a few of these diets available, the Blue Zone diet and others, where it's suggested that if we emulate the diet of these Blue Zone communities, then we too will have improved health, wellness, and longevity. Dr. Lucy, I know you've got some very sensible things to say on this topic. What do you think the relevance of the Blue Zone communities are to our people, to the people here who are living a modern lifestyle who want to lose weight?
So I think there's a couple of things. Firstly, the communities that are in the blue zones, it's not just the food. The food is important and the food is whole food, and they often grow or catch their own food. You know, and I'm thinking of fish in particular for the Japanese blue zone. But there are other factors as well. So these people are very community orientated. So there's a lot of deep social connection for them. They have purpose in their life. They sleep well and they have minimal stress. Well, you know, different levels of stress compared to the way the modern Western lifestyle is functioning. So it's really important to look at that as a whole concept, not just a one little aspect of it. But the other thing is that these people are living this lifestyle from birth. So it's very difficult to then take somebody, say a Western person who's maybe 50 years old and has, one of my favourite terms that I like to talk about is, you know, buggered the metabolism. So they are insulin resistant, they're not sleeping well, they've got work stress, family stress, and then pick out the bit that says, well, you know, if they ate a diet rich in tubers, they would live longer. And this is the danger with lots of nutritional advice. People take a soundbite or a snippet and then say, well, you know, if this applies to this person or this country or this community, then we should do that too.
Yes, absolutely. Just cherry picking that one little part of these healthy blue zone communities and just taking that bit, you know, maybe that they eat lots of fish and starchy tubers and saying, well, if I eat lots of fish and starchy tubers, I too will have the health of a blue zone 112-year-old. And it just isn't true. It's not how it works. Certainly, there are wonderful things to learn from looking at these blue zone communities, and it's all the stuff you talked about, Lucy. It's the social connection, the community, the purpose, the sleep, the relative stress management, the fact that they eat diets that are unprocessed and full of healthy whole foods. These are all wonderful things. But if you have a buggered metabolism from, 50 years of eating processed foods, then you need to get your insulin down. And the way to do that is to absolutely eat real unprocessed food and to eat low carbohydrate versions of real unprocessed foods. That is what we're all about at Real Life Medicine.
Totally. And you know what, Mares, is also, this is why we, as an organisation, we promote the holistic care of the person. You can't give somebody a 2-week meal plan or a 6-week meal plan and expect that that is going to change their life. It is way, more detailed than that. In order to get good health, it's about low-carb real food. It's about reducing your insulin. It's about prioritising your sleep, managing your stress, which is a whole 10 episodes in itself, and then unlearning some of the dietary dogma that we have, as Western women in particular, been exposed to over the years and years of, trying to manage our weight, not always for health, but to fit into what is considered to be beauty in our society.
And it is so wonderful that the tide is changing, that health professionals are allowing good science to start to dictate the health advice that we are giving, and that low carbohydrate lifestyles are now becoming more and more mainstream as a very safe and effective way to treat the cause of metabolic disease.
Absolutely. I guess the 2 take-home points I would love our listeners to really think about, and that is the treatment of overweight and obesity is different to the prevention, and that 50 years of our Western diet has buggered our metabolism. But all is not lost, because we can repair it, but it needs low-carb real food.
Absolutely. The low carb real food is central to healing the metabolism, but also the stress management, sleep management, and managing your mind are all essential components to getting your health back on track. And all of this does take time. And, Lucy, with our programs, our online 12-week mind and body rebalance programs, we take 3 months guiding people step by step through the food, through the hormones, through the mind management, the stress management, the sleep management, and how to fast safely. It's a 3-month comprehensive program because these things take time. They're doable. They are extremely doable, but they take time.
Totally. All right, Maz. I've had a wonderful chat today.
So have I.
So until next week, our lovely listeners, take care and we'll see you then.
Bye now.
So, my lovely listeners, that ends this episode of Real Health and Weight Loss. I'm Dr. Lucy Burns.
And I'm Dr. Mary Barson. We're from Real Life Medicine. To contact us, please visit rlmedicine.com.
And until next time, thanks for listening.